when you're when you're putting like lamps and stuff around a house, one thing that you have to deal with is plugging them in. And something that always annoys me about level design in games is when there's something, some lamp or piece of electronics that would have to be plugged in because it doesn't run on batteries, but it doesn't have a cable because video games. And so since a big part of the point of Gone Home is the specificity of the house and the believability of all the details.
Because of that, Steve himself.
I spent some late nights with my meager Maya skills modeling custom cables for each of the things that's plugged in so that the cables actually run from the TV or the lamp or whatever to an outlet in the wall.
It is a really good detail. I think that I'm proud of you for getting that in there, Steve. That's important. Yeah. So these are all the VHS tapes, or most of them, in the house. And these in the TV room are from they only belong to Dad and Sam, because Mom has some VHS tapes, but they're up in the bedroom. And you can tell Dad's because he writes in a big, heavy, all caps style handwriting, and Sam does not. So, contrary to popular opinion, the X-Files tapes are not Dad's, they're in fact Sam's.
But stuff like JFK
yes.
has an obvious dad interest, and some of the other stuff that we put in there was very much like, what is a dad movie?
Yeah.
What is when we were growing up, for instance, like, what is a movie that our dad or a neighbor's dad would have? So stuff like the Andromeda Strain or Moonraker, it's just sort of like, yeah, dads
love that shit.
Yeah, dads that were born in the 50s were super into that kind of stuff. And then some of it was, stuff that we liked or remembered from when we were growing up. Like, you will know that Carla was involved in making this game because Beetlejuice and RoboCop are on a VHS tape. That's most of what you need to know about Carla.
That's true.
Right there.
My name is Sarah Grayson, and I do the voice of Sam Greenbrier in Gone Home. Currently based out of Portland, Oregon, so right around where the Fulbright Company is from, which is part of, I guess, how this all came to be. I started doing voiceover work probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a bit of an on and off journey, because I also have had regular 9-to-5 jobs that whole time. So I always get excited when I see video game auditions come across, because it's always been something that I wanted to do, and really excites me because I'm a video game fan myself. So there was an audition that came across that at the time was entitled Dear Diary, and it had this wonderful description about being this sort of 16, 17-year-old girl. Not too much detail about her, just that she was new to her school, new to this place she was living, and her sister had moved away. So she was sort of writing out her thoughts as if she was talking to her sister. So most of the time, I'll stand up at the mic when doing auditions. But for this one, I thought, well, no one's actually going to read their diary standing up. Like, this is kind of you write your diary while lying down on your bed, or like sitting cross-legged on the floor, or whatever. So I ended up having to pull the mic down, sat on my couch, legs crossed, got nice and cozied up in like my pajamas, and started reading it.
Most of the bookshelves in the house are filled with undifferentiated books. I mean, they're not undifferentiated, but they're low detail, because, God, it would be an entire dev cycle's worth of work to actually do plausible spines on every single book. That would kill us. And then to repeat a whole bunch of books would also be sort of terrible, and not be very plausible. So we had chiefly unlabeled books, or books in which the labels have been rubbed off due to age, etc. And we had a few individual books that were more precisely and specifically named.
The way that we did the books in the game is we made like 3 or 4 of these clumps of books that have, the generic spines on them. They're just sort of filler books. They're kind of like what would be in the bookshelves of like a lawyer's office in a in a cheap lawyer's TV commercial or something.
Right, where they buy them by the foot and whatever.
Yeah, and then we took 1 or 2 clumps and retextured them to all have specific readable spines on them, and then I just took those clumps and broke them up and scattered the individual books around in different bookshelves in the house, so that hopefully I think every bookshelf has at least one unique book in it. That might not be true of everything in the library since there's so many bookshelves there, but I guess I should say every or almost every bookcase had at least one unique book in it that never repeated, to kind of split the difference of, okay, they're not all generic, but also we can't afford to make them all unique, and we didn't want to have any repeat in an obvious way. So that was our strategy for trying to not do any of the things that we wanted to not do.
This is our old-timey record that we got from archive.org, source of all good things. It's by Adrian Rollini when he was with, apparently, the Taproom Gang. The song is entitled Got a Need for You, in case you can't read it, which you should be able to read it. And the duck I found on the internet. Adrian Rollini I got into him when I was on Bioshock 2 and helping source the soundtrack for that. And I did a lot of listening to 40s big band stuff, and Adrian Rollini was one of the ones that I really liked, and so it was cool to be able to revisit that.
Sam's story slash school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a Novella, is kind of a fan favorite. We've found like a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot, and it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like, it was, let's see, I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done like some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in like the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about like cool female spies in World War II, or like saboteurs, that had been part of like the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II, and so kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, like that is a person, but while fulfilling the requirements of the thing. And yeah, it ended up being this really kind of strange juxtaposition of concepts that ended up saying a lot about Sam, I think.
I feel like one of the best bits of advice was actually from the Fulbright team before going in to do the first recording. And it was a suggestion that I should watch some episodes of My So-Called Life, which was great because I'd watched them all when they were actually on. It was one of those favorite shows my sister and I would sit down and watch every week. And so going back and watching them was definitely not a hard chore to have to do. So I basically went through all of the episodes I could find online in a couple of days. So it was a bit of a sudden binge watch of My So-Called Life, but it was great because I think watching My So-Called Life was a nice reminder of what a more natural presentation of a teenager is. So it was really... I don't know that it would have gone as well had I not done that.
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam, and he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone. So I just started doing these short 20 to 60 second pieces, and that ended up being the bulk of the work for the game. It was a very iterative process. I did them in the order they were recorded, and I would just keep sending revisions of each log to Steve, taking his feedback, modifying the piece, and sending it back. Especially at the beginning, the feedback was almost always pull it back more. I've never done music this subdued before. Even more so than most game music, it primarily exists to quietly suggest a mood and tone to the player. Sarah's voice is always the main audio content. The game soundtrack I worked on previous to this was Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving, which consists of some really huge, bombastic, brassy pieces. So switching gears to Gone Home and constantly hearing pull it back, less melody, was surprisingly challenging at first. But over time, I think Steve and I developed a pretty good rapport. For the most part, the diaries required fewer revisions each time. And it's always a good reminder in a collaborative endeavor that your contribution only exists to make the whole work better, not to be seen or heard unto itself.
I had seen Bikini Kill and Bratmobile play their first show at the North Shore Surf Club in Olympia. That was Valentine's Day, 1991. And I was kind of blown away by the incredible rawness and the honesty that they wrote with, and the kind of flippancy that they had. I thought was really interesting. But to have the opportunity to talk about all of these issues that are really important to young women, I thought was really special. And I thought that what they were doing was taking the kind of intense feminist ideas that had become popular in the 70s with, SDSS, and now, those really, incredible ideas and the ideology of feminism, but they were putting it into a language for today, for the 90s, I guess. That was 20 years ago, but it was for young people, and it was to relate to topics about sexuality, about sex, about sexual abuse, about sexism and harassment, and all these things that are really important for young women coming of age and becoming sexual beings that are really taboo to talk about.
Around here, you will find some of Sam's Super Nintendo cartridges that she left behind. Obviously, for legal reasons, we couldn't put real games in, and so we conscripted a few of our friends in the industry who are really talented artists to make cool label art for fake Nintendo games that we came up with.
It's so true. The first one was Super Spitfire, and that was by Rachel Morris, who is a cool artist. What is it? The NYU?
The NYU Game Center. She's done a bunch of posters and other art for them.
And then the next one was Adventures the Cat Returns, which is it's sort of a.
It's a mascot platformer. Yeah. It's a Bubsy-esque Tood having cat.
Oh yeah, but it's a regular cat. It's not a bald cat.
Yeah, it's a regular cat that rides a motorcycle towards an explosion.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lee Petty is the art director at Double Fine and worked on Brutal Legend, and I think he led up Stacking, and awesome. He was nice enough to spend some of his free time making the label for Adventures the Cat Returns.
Yeah, we ran into him at GDC, and he offered to help us out, and we were all like, cool.
We were like, oh, you didn't think we'd take you up on that offer, did you? Draw us a cat.
Yeah, he regretted the error of his ways. And then the third one is Journey of Crystal, which is sort of a JRPG beast, and that was done by Gen Z.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's the art director at Supergiant, and she did pretty all of the art in Bastion, and is working on Transistor. I know we had some people say that they they could tell that it was her
Mhm.
art because it has such a signature look,
It's pretty distinctive.
to how she does things. So it was really cool and really exciting to have these really talented people from other studios that are inspirations to us contribute their unique art to the game. So these are stereoscopic?
Stereogram?
Yeah, these are stereograms.
Yeah,
That's the
stereogrammatic.
yeah stereograms, popularized by the Magic Eye brand of images from the 80s and 90s. These really work. Like if you cross your eyes and you can do a Magic Eye image, you can see what's in these. Spoilers, they are.
Well, as I recall, there's a cool shark.
And
I don't remember what the other
Carla,
one is. What?
it's a big heart.
Okay, it's hard for me to do those things.
And that's true for a lot of people. So the two instances of people not being able to see those images are they just can't do them, which a lot of people just can't do them, or they were born in the late 90s or after the 90s and played our game and didn't know what the hell these things were.
Yeah, they're like, what is this weird static shit? Yeah.
Well, I thought
So
it was
good.
like we got some messages that were like, I thought it was just a weird drawing.
So good.
So, yes, as you get older, you can't hear really high-pitched sounds anymore, and you know what Magic Eyes are still.
It's the circle of life.